What if I told you the city running America was designed as a military fortress, has its own species of underground mosquitoes, and tropical parrots that refuse to leave despite freezing winters? Welcome to Washington, D.C., where reality is stranger than any conspiracy theory you have ever heard. The nation's capital looks like marble monuments and political power on the surface. But underneath all that patriotic grandeur is a city so bizarre, so absolutely insane, that even people who have lived there their entire lives would struggle to believe what is hiding in plain sight. We are talking secret underground train systems, constitutional contradictions that would make the founding fathers roll in their graves, and building codes so weird they literally shaped the entire skyline. Today we are counting down 25 absolutely true facts about Washington, D.C. that sound completely made up. And trust me, by the time we hit number 1, you will never look at America's capital the same way again. These are not rumors or legends. Every single thing you are about to hear is documented, verified, and completely real. Let's get into it. At number 25, we have something that sounds like total nonsense, but is actually rooted in history. The city was literally built on a swamp. Now the whole swamp thing has become a political metaphor, but there is actual truth to this claim that most people dismiss. Much of Washington, D.C. was genuine marshland and swamp before any development happened. The Potomac River's tidal basin area was particularly nasty and boggy, basically a mosquito breeding ground nightmare. Building a capital city there required absolutely massive drainage projects to create stable ground that would not sink. They had to move literal tons of earth and water just to make the ground solid enough for construction. So when politicians talk about draining the swamp, they are accidentally referencing the actual engineering challenge that built their workplace. The irony is almost too perfect. Coming in at number 24 is something that will blow your mind the first time you see it. There are monk parakeets living wild in Washington, D.C. We are talking bright green tropical parrots that have somehow established thriving colonies around the city, despite winters that should absolutely kill them. These birds build massive communal nests on electrical transformers and power lines. You can spot them chattering away in trees year-round. Little pops of neon green against gray winter skies. Nobody is quite sure how they got there originally. Probably escaped pets that decided city life suited them just fine. But here's the kicker. These tropical birds survive Washington winters that regularly drop below freezing. They huddle together in their giant stick nests and just tough it out. Nature finds a way, and apparently that way involves parrots in one of America's coldest major cities. At number 23, we have something you can actually see with your own eyes if you visit. The Washington Monument is 2 different colors. Seriously, look closely next time you see it. About 150 feet up, the stone changes from lighter to darker. It looks like they ran out of paint halfway through. But the real story is even wilder. Construction on the monument completely halted for 23 years during the Civil War. When they finally started building again, they had to get marble from different quarries. The original source was tapped out, so the new stone did not match. Now that color difference is a permanent reminder of America's most divisive conflict, literally carved into the most iconic monument in the nation's capital. Every time you look at it, you are seeing history written in stone. They could have fixed it, but they left it as is. Number 22 is about the people who actually run this town. Washington, D.C. has more lawyers per capita than anywhere else on Earth. We are not exaggerating. 1 in every 12 workers in D.C. is an attorney, the highest concentration of lawyers in any city worldwide. Think about that for a second. In a city of over 700,000 people, tens of thousands are practicing attorneys. The legal profession does not just influence D.C. It quite literally runs the entire place. Every decision, every policy, every comma, and every law passes through an army of lawyers. At number 21, things get properly weird. The DC metro system has its own mosquito species, not just mosquitoes that happen to live there. An actual distinct subspecies that evolved separately from mosquitoes on the surface. Scientists call them Culex pipiens e molestus. These underground bloodsuckers have adapted to live their entire lives in the metro tunnel system. They breed in puddles of stagnant water. They bite maintenance workers, and they have developed different behaviors than their surface cousins. Evolution happened right under the city, creating a new form of life in the darkness. This is not science fiction. These mosquitoes are genetically distinct enough that scientists consider them a separate subspecies. The metro created a unique environment and nature filled that niche with custom-built vampires that never see sunlight. Welcome to Underground DC. Number 20 brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about Washington. People say buildings cannot be taller than the Capitol dome. That is mostly false. The Height of Buildings Act actually limits structures to the width of the adjacent street plus 20 feet, not the Capitol's height. So DC's distinctive low-rise skyline exists, but for totally different reasons than most people think. A building on a wide avenue can be taller than one on a narrow street. It has nothing to do with respecting the Capitol. It is just weird math about street width. This creates one of the most unique cityscapes in America. No skyscrapers, no towering glass buildings, just a spread-out urban landscape that feels more like a really dense suburb than a major city. All because of a law that nobody understands correctly. At number 19, we have something that sounds like a movie set, but is completely real. There is a spy museum in DC hiding actual CIA artifacts. The International Spy Museum contains genuine espionage equipment that was declassified from Cold War operations. We are talking lipstick pistols that actually fired bullets, buttonhole cameras that actually photographed secrets, real tools used by Soviet and American agents during history's greatest intelligence war. This is not Hollywood prop nonsense. These devices actually changed the course of history. You can walk through and see the actual gadgets that spies used to steal nuclear secrets, assassinate targets, and gather intelligence that prevented World War III. It is like stepping into a James Bond movie, except everything on display really worked and really mattered. Number 18 is the most un-American thing about America's capital. DC residents pay federal taxes but cannot vote for Congress. Over 700,000 people pay full federal income tax, yet have zero voting representation in the House or Senate. The phrase taxation without representation appears on every single DC license plate. It is an official protest against the exact injustice that sparked the American Revolution. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The seat of democracy denies democracy to its own residents. DC has a mayor and city council, but when it comes to federal representation, those 700,000 Americans might as well not exist. They get to vote for president, but have no say in the laws that govern them. It is a constitutional contradiction hiding in plain. Coming in at number 17 is something that will make your head spin. The Library of Congress contains 173 million items. It is the world's largest library, with materials in 470 languages and shelves stretching 838 miles. If you laid those shelves end to end, they would reach from Washington, D.C. all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. That is not a metaphor or an estimate. Actual measured distance. You could walk along library shelves from the Capitol to the beaches of Florida. Everything from ancient Sumerian clay tablets to modern digital archives lives in this building. The entire sum of human knowledge, or at least a huge chunk of it, sitting right there in Washington. And most people just walk past it without realizing what is inside. At number 16, we are going underground again. There are secret tunnels connecting congressional buildings. An entire subway and pedestrian tunnel network links the Capitol to congressional office buildings, some of these passages dating back to 1909. Senators and representatives navigate this subterranean maze to avoid weather, protesters, and most importantly, the public eye. While you are standing outside wondering where your elected officials are, they are literally underneath your feet moving through tunnels you cannot access. These are not small service tunnels either. We are talking full subway cars, wide pedestrian walkways, and entire underground corridors that feel like a different city beneath the city. Secret passages for the people who write your laws. Number 15 is about speed that seems physically impossible. The Pentagon was built in just 16 months. Despite being the world's largest low-rise office building at 6.5 million square feet, it was constructed during World War II in absolutely record time. Workers poured concrete 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What should have been a 5-year project was completed in less than a year and a half. They built a building the size of a small city in the time it takes most people to renovate a kitchen. The urgency of war does crazy things to construction timelines. The Pentagon went from blueprints to fully operational in a time frame that would be illegal under modern building codes. Speed was everything, and somehow they pulled it off without the whole thing collapsing. At number 14, conspiracy theorists lose their minds. DC's streets form a hidden Masonic compass. Pierre L'Enfant's original design allegedly incorporates Masonic symbols throughout the city layout. When viewed from above, the street grid appears to form pentagrams and occult imagery. Now, historians debate whether this was intentional or just people seeing patterns where none exist. But the shapes are definitely there. You can trace pentagram formations in the streets north of the White House. Compasses, squares, and other Masonic symbols appear in the city blueprint. Whether Longtime was secretly embedding mystical geometry into America's capital, or this is all confirmation bias, does not change the fact that the patterns exist. The city's bones form shapes that make conspiracy theorists very, very excited. Number 13 is about the best deal in America. You can visit 19 Smithsonian museums for absolutely free, zero admission charge. The world's largest museum complex, completely accessible to the public without spending a single dime. From dinosaur fossils to space shuttles, from the Hope Diamond to Archie Bunker's actual chair from the TV show, it is all there, and it costs nothing. You could spend weeks exploring world-class museums and never open your wallet. This is not some limited free day promotion. Every day, every museum, totally free. Air and space, natural history, American history, the National Gallery, all of it. It is one of the most democratic things about a city that struggles with democracy. At number 12, we are talking about the most famous address in America. The White House has 132 rooms and 35 bathrooms. But here is what most people do not know. It also has a bowling alley, movie theater, tennis court, jogging track, swimming pool, and full medical clinic. It is basically a small luxury resort that happens to be where the president works and lives. You could spend weeks inside and never run out of amenities. The leader of the free world can bowl a few frames, watch a movie, and go for a swim without ever leaving home. The medical clinic is a full operating facility, with emergency equipment and staff on site 24/7. The movie theater screens first run films before they hit regular theaters. It is a self-contained world designed so the president never has to be anywhere else. Coming in at number 11 is a gift with a complicated history. The cherry blossoms were Japan's apology gift. Tokyo sent 3,000 trees in 1912 as a gesture of friendship after previous diplomatic tensions. But the story gets weirder. The first batch of trees arrived, diseased and completely infested with pests. Officials had to incinerate all of them. Every single tree burned. Japan sent a second shipment, and those survived to become the iconic cherry blossoms that define DC springtime today. So the beautiful pink blooms that draw millions of tourists every year almost never happened. They are the result of a diplomatic do-over, a second chance that worked out better than anyone imagined. Friendship survived plant disease. At number 10, we have another exclusive underground feature. The Capitol building has its own subway system. Senators ride a private underground train between the Capitol and their office buildings to avoid being late to votes. The public cannot use it. It is exclusively for members of Congress and their staff. While regular Americans deal with traffic and metro delays, elected officials zip through private tunnels on their own personal subway. Two separate transportation systems for two separate classes of people. This subway has been running since 1912, over a century of congressional privilege, riding rails that taxpayers funded but cannot access. It is a perfect metaphor for how differently the government treats itself versus everyone else. Number 9 takes us back inside the Washington Monument. There is a Bible carved into the structure. Among 193 memorial stones embedded in the interior walls are phrases from Scripture, including Proverbs 22 verse 6. These stones were donated by states, cities, and foreign governments during the monument's incredibly prolonged construction. Each one tells a story, and together they form a weird museum inside one of America's most recognizable landmarks. Most people ride the elevator up and down without ever noticing these stones, but if you take the stairs, you walk past pieces of history from all over the world, including chunks of the Great Wall of China and stones from ancient Rome. At number 8, we have one of the dumbest laws in DC history. The city once banned frisbees in national parks. Until 2015, throwing a frisbee on the National Mall could result in fines up to $100. The ban was intended to preserve the grass. You also could not play catch, fly kites, or engage in any recreational activities without getting a permit first. Imagine visiting the nation's capital and getting fined for tossing a frisbee. Absolutely ridiculous. They finally repealed this nonsense, but for decades you could get in legal trouble for having fun on federal grass. Meanwhile, politicians inside those buildings were making decisions about freedom and liberty. The irony was not lost on anyone. Number 7 reveals something shocking about those free museums we mentioned earlier. The Smithsonian only displays 1% of its collection. With over 156 million artifacts, most sit in massive storage facilities scattered across the region. Dorothy's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, the Wright brothers' original worksheets, Abraham Lincoln's blood-stained hat from the night he was assassinated, all stored away where the public cannot see them. The visible museums are just the tip of an enormous iceberg. There are entire warehouses full of priceless historical objects that may never go on display. The Smithsonian has so much stuff that they cannot possibly show it all. 99% of American history sits in climate-controlled darkness here. Coming in at number 6 is a timeline twist. Georgetown existed before Washington, D.C. Established in 1751, Georgetown is actually older than the capital itself, and was once a separate Maryland city with its own independent government. It was not absorbed into Washington, D.C. until 1871. For over a century, Georgetown was its own thing, a thriving port city that predated the federal district. When people talk about historic D.C., Georgetown is literally where that history started. Walk through Georgetown today, and you are walking through streets that existed before America declared independence. Before there was a United States, there was Georgetown. The neighborhood has historical bragging rights that the rest of D.C. cannot touch here. At number 5, we are going back underground to the FBI headquarters. The J. Edgar Hoover building has a shooting range in its basement, full firearms training facilities where agents practice target shooting, right beneath downtown Washington. The building also houses the FBI's most sensitive evidence and classified operations centers. While tourists walk past on the street level, federal agents are stories below practicing marksmanship and analyzing evidence that could change national security. It is a fortress, disguised as an office building. Concrete walls thick enough to stop bullets, secure vault rooms, and underground facilities that most D.C. residents do not even know exist. The FBI built itself a castle and hid it in plain sight. Number 4 is about international presence. There are more than 170 foreign embassies in Washington, D.C., more than any other city on the planet. Each embassy is considered sovereign foreign soil under international law. Here, you can technically visit dozens of countries without ever leaving the city limits. Walk into the French embassy, and you are legally in France. Step into the Japanese embassy, and you are in Japan. All these tiny pieces of foreign nations, scattered throughout D.C. Some embassies are architectural masterpieces that showcase their home countries. Others blend into the cityscape, but all of them represent a piece of the wider world, making Washington one of the most internationally connected cities in America. At number 3, we have the most protected documents in existence. The original Constitution is displayed in near darkness at the National Archives. To prevent light damage, founding documents sit in argon-filled titanium cases under extremely low light conditions. The parchment is so fragile that even camera flashes were once completely prohibited. These are not reproductions or copies. This is the actual Constitution that the Founding Fathers signed. The real deal, protected like nuclear launch codes. Every night, the documents are lowered into an underground vault designed to survive nuclear attack. If DC gets destroyed, the Constitution survives. It is the most important piece of paper in American history, and they treat it accordingly. Number 2 reveals the military mindset behind DC's creation. The city was designed to be impossible to invade. L'Enfant's diagonal streets create confusing intersections for enemy forces and provide clear sightlines for defending artillery. It is essentially a military fortress design disguised as a city grid. Those wide, beautiful boulevards were not built for aesthetics. They were kill zones. Open spaces where defending forces could mow down invading armies with clear fields of fire. Every circle, every diagonal, every seemingly random street angle serves a defensive purpose. DC was built as a trap for anyone stupid enough to try capturing it. The city itself is a weapon, designed by military engineers who knew exactly what they were doing. And now we have reached number 1. The most undemocratic fact about America's democracy. The contradiction so massive, it makes everything else on this list look normal. Congress can overturn any DC law. Despite having an elected mayor and city council, Congress retains ultimate authority over all local legislation. Let that sink in for a moment. The seat of American democracy is itself governed completely undemocratically. 700,000 Americans living in the nation's capital are subject to politicians elected by people who do not even live there. People who have never set foot in D.C. can control its laws. D.C. residents elect local officials just like any other city. Those officials pass laws about schools, traffic, local taxes, all the normal stuff cities handle, and then Congress can just say no and throw the whole thing out. It happens all the time. This is not theoretical power. In 1976, Congress overturned a D.C. law that would have allowed local control over the city budget. In 1998, they blocked a medical marijuana initiative that D.C. voters approved by almost 70%. The will of the people meant absolutely nothing. In 2015, Congress prevented D.C. from spending its own locally raised tax money on abortion services, not federal money. The city's own revenue from its own residents, and Congress said no anyway. That is how deep this control goes. Congress has overturned D.C. laws about gun control, needle exchange programs, recreational marijuana legalization, minimum wage increases, and affordable housing initiatives. Every single one passed by elected D.C. officials, representing actual D.C. residents. Every single one vetoed by Congress. The phrase taxation without representation appears on every D.C. license plate as an official protest. It is the exact same injustice that sparked the American Revolution, the founding principle that launched this entire nation, and yet here we are, repeating it in the Capitol itself. D.C. residents pay full federal income tax. They pay Social Security. They pay Medicare. They contribute billions to the federal treasury every single year, more per capita than any state in the Union. And they get zero voting representation in the body that governs them. They have a delegate to the House of Representatives who cannot vote on the floor, cannot vote on bills, cannot vote on amendments, can only speak and serve on committees. That is it. Imagine your voice in government being decorative, present but powerless. They have no senators at all, zero. While Wyoming with fewer than 600,000 people gets 2 senators with full voting power, over 700,000 D.C. residents get none. The imbalance is staggering when you actually think about it. And here is where it gets even more absurd. D.C. residents can vote for president. They get 3 electoral votes through the 23rd Amendment passed in 1961, but they still cannot vote for the legislature that actually writes the laws they live under every single day. So you can vote for who runs the country, but not for who governs your own neighborhood. You can pick the commander-in-chief, but have zero say in whether your local schools get funded. The contradiction is so extreme, it sounds made up. The federal district was created in 1790 when Maryland and Virginia ceded land for a neutral capital. The idea was that no state should have undue influence over the federal government. That made sense then, but nobody imagined a city of over 700,000 people living there. When D.C. was created, it had about 14,000 residents. Now it has more people than Wyoming or Vermont, more than Alaska. It would be the 49th largest state by population. Yet it has less self-governance than any incorporated town in America. The Founding Fathers designed a system where the federal government would not be beholden to any state. They did not design a system where hundreds of thousands of American citizens would be beholden to a government they cannot vote for. That was never the intention. D.C. has tried for statehood, repeatedly. The movement has been ongoing for decades. 51 stars on the flag. Full representation. The ability to govern itself like every other jurisdiction in America. And every time it gets blocked in Congress. The arguments against statehood are wild. Some say D.C. is too small, even though it has more people than 2 existing states. Some say it would give Democrats too much power, which is literally saying we should deny people rights based on their politics. Some claim the Constitution prohibits it, even though the Constitution only requires a federal district for government buildings. The actual residential neighborhoods where people live could easily become a state while leaving federal property under federal control. It has been legally mapped out multiple times. Meanwhile, D.C. residents serve in the military. They fight in wars. They die for a country that denies them equal representation. Thousands of D.C. residents have given their lives in service to a democracy that does not extend to their own hometown. Think about that. You can be drafted from D.C. You can be sent to fight overseas. You can die defending American democratic principles, but you cannot vote for the senators who declared that war. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. This is not ancient history. This is happening right now. Today, as you watch this video, over 700,000 Americans are living under a government they cannot vote for, paying taxes to representatives they cannot elect, living in a democracy that excludes them. Every other capital city in every other democracy on Earth gives its residents full voting rights. London, Paris, Berlin, Tokyo, Canberra, Ottawa, every single one. America is the only major democracy that denies its capital residents equal representation. The only one. So when you hear politicians talk about spreading democracy, defending freedom, protecting the right to vote, remember this. The city where they work, the city where they pass those laws, the city they govern from, is itself profoundly undemocratic. The irony is almost unbearable. DC is America's biggest blind spot. The constitutional contradiction hiding in plain sight. The place where all the high-minded ideals about government of the people, by the people, for the people completely break down. 700,000 people prove the exception to every rule. And that is number one. The most undemocratic thing about America's democracy. A city full of people who write laws for 330 million Americans but cannot fully govern themselves, who pay taxes but lack representation, who live in the capital of freedom without being fully free. So there you have it. 25 absolutely real facts about Washington, D.C. that sound completely made up. From swamps to parrots, from tunnels to tyranny, the nation's capital is stranger than any story you could invent. Which fact shocked you most? Let us know in the comments, and share this with someone who thinks they know everything about Washington. Because in this city, the truth really is stranger than fiction.